Welcome to our channel, where we celebrate the incredible bond between humans and dogs. Today, we're bringing you an emotional journey about how one dog can change a life forever. If you're someone who believes in the loyalty, love, and courage that dogs bring into our lives, this story will touch your heart. So sit back, grab a tissue, and let's dive into a beautiful tale of friendship and resilience. Silence filled every corner of Clara's small apartment. She sat in the armchair near the window, where she used to watch the city's hustle and bustle, but now her eyes stared into nothingness. Since the accident, her life seemed to have stopped. The darkness was constant, inescapable. Everything that once brought color and life had vanished in a single instant. Before losing her sight, Clara was a renowned art curator. Her daily routine was filled with exhibitions, meetings with artists, and trips to discover new talents. Art was what gave meaning to her days. But all of that disappeared the moment she was hit by a car at an intersection. The accident took her vision, and along with it, her confidence and identity. Now, the apartment that once served as her cozy refuge had turned into a prison. The walls that used to offer comfort and rest seemed to close in on her, suffocating her. Initially, friends and family tried to comfort her. There were frequent visits, phone calls, and invitations to go out, but Clara turned them all down. The idea of facing the outside world without her vision was too terrifying. Text here. Days passed slowly, wrapped in a lifeless routine. Every step she took inside the apartment only deepened the emptiness she felt. She couldn't help but wonder how she had ended up here. Once, she was an independent, confident woman, in control of her own destiny. Now she could barely leave her home without feeling the crushing weight of helplessness. Blindness hadn't just taken her sight, it had stolen her will to live. The sound of the accident still echoed in her mind, the screeching tires, the impact, the muffled cries of the people around her. When she woke up in the hospital, enveloped in darkness, her first hope was that it was temporary. But hope quickly gave way to devastation when the diagnosis came. The blindness was permanent. Clara felt her world collapse in that instant. Now, the memories of her old life haunted her. The museum, the paintings, the exhibitions, they all seemed lost forever. She wondered if she would ever feel like she belonged to this world again. The sound of the doorbell echoed through the apartment, interrupting the usual silence. Clara hesitated for a moment before slowly getting up and walking toward the door. Since the accident, visits had become rare, and each one filled her with growing anxiety. When she opened the door, a familiar voice greeted her. "Clara, it's me, Mariana," said the social worker who visited her occasionally. "I brought someone for you to meet." Clara heard the sound of paws on the floor and felt something moving around her. A gentle brush against her leg made her heart race for a second. Confused, she stepped back slightly. What is this?" she asked, trying to keep the tension out of her voice. "This is Max, a guide dog," Mariana responded softly. "I think he can help you regain some independence." Clara stood in silence for a few moments. The idea of a guide dog had been suggested before, but she had always resisted it. To her, accepting Max felt like admitting defeat, acknowledging her incapacity. Yet something about Max's calm and patient demeanor made her hesitate to reject the idea right away. "I don't know if I can handle this," Clara said, lowering her head. "You don't have to decide right now," Mariana said gently. "But think about it. Max is here to help. He won't judge you, only guide you." Clara felt a soft, warm touch on her hand. Max had approached, calmly pressing his nose against her palm. Reluctantly, she allowed the contact, feeling the dog's warm breath. There was something comforting in that simple gesture. Maybe, just maybe, he could be different. "I'll try," she whispered, almost to herself. Max lay down beside Clara as if he understood that his role wasn't just to guide her through the streets, but through the darkest moments of her life as well. The day was clear, and the sound of traffic was a constant noise that Clara had learned to fear. She stood at the entrance of her building, with Max by her side. Her heart raced as she tried to control her breathing. Mariana had insisted that she take this first walk with Max, but anxiety consumed her. "He's here to guide you. Trust him," were Mariana's last words before leaving. Clara gripped the leash tightly, feeling the tension in Max's body. He was ready, but she wasn't. Her hands shook. "I don't know if I can do this," she muttered. Still, Max took a step forward, and she felt compelled to follow him. The first few meters were slow. Every sound, every honking horn, felt like an insurmountable obstacle. Clara kept her breaths short, the fear pounding with every step. She trusted only in Max's movements, who walked calmly beside her, leading her steps almost imperceptibly. Yet, the terror of losing control was ever present. As they approached a busy street, the sound of cars became deafening. Clara stopped abruptly, her body tense, unable to continue. Sensing her hesitation, Max stopped as well, waiting patiently for her. "No, I can't," she said, turning in an attempt to go back home. But before she could take a step backward, a loud honking sound froze her in place. She had stopped too close to the curb, and the movement of cars around her felt like a swirling chaos. Max tried to pull her back onto the sidewalk, but Clara, disoriented, nearly fell. Panic took over. She heard tires screeching and people shouting. The fear crushed her like a heavy weight. Her body was paralyzed, and tears began to flow uncontrollably. Everything around her seemed to spin. Then she felt Max again. Even amidst the chaos, he stayed by her side, unmoving. Clara crouched down and, for the first time, clung to him as if her life depended on it. Her breathing was erratic, and tears streamed down her face. After a few moments, Max took a slow step, guiding her back to the safety of the sidewalk, away from the danger. He stood by her, firm, until Clara calmed down. Finally, she managed to stand up, her heart still racing. She started, but couldn't finish the sentence. The shame and sense of failure were overwhelming. "I can't do this," she whispered, releasing Max's leash. The days following the disastrous walk passed slowly. Clara avoided leaving her apartment at all costs. She barely looked at Max, still weighed down by the guilt of her failure. Yet Max remained calm and patient, always close by, as if waiting for the right moment. Even without speaking, Clara could feel Max's comforting presence in every corner of the apartment. He didn't force interaction, but was always near, like a silent shadow. At night, when she sat on the couch, Max would lie quietly at her feet, not making a sound, simply offering his presence. At first, Clara ignored it, but over time, that simple gesture began to break through the wall of indifference she had built. One afternoon, Clara was trying to listen to an audiobook when the electronic voice abruptly stopped. Irritated, she fiddled with the device, but nothing seemed to fix it. Frustration boiled over, and she threw the player onto the couch. She felt helpless again, trapped in a world where everything seemed impossible. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she couldn't hold them back. That's when Max approached. The soft brush of his nose against her hand caught Clara off guard. For a moment, she thought about pushing him away, but something inside her made her stop. She didn't resist the touch. She gently stroked Max's head, feeling his soft fur under her fingers. The simple action brought a sense of calm she didn't expect. Max stayed there, still, quietly receiving her affection. It was as if he understood exactly what she was feeling, as if he knew the weight she was carrying. And for a few minutes, Clara allowed herself to relax, to let her defenses down, even if just for a moment. That night, Clara didn't feel so alone. Something had shifted. The space between her and Max felt smaller. The dog she had once rejected was slowly beginning to fill the void she thought was insurmountable. The sound of letters slipping through the door broke Clara's thoughts. She walked slowly to the door, guided by Max, and picked up the envelopes that had been delivered. Most of the time, they were just bills or flyers she didn't bother with. But this time, one letter stood out. The envelope had the logo of the museum, where she used to work before the accident. Clara sat on the couch and, with trembling hands, opened the letter. It was from a former colleague, an old friend she hadn't seen since she lost her sight. He was inviting her to the opening of a new exhibition at the museum, mentioning how much everyone missed her and hoped she could attend. As she read those words, Clara's heart tightened. The invitation brought back a flood of emotions. The museum had been part of her old life, a life she wasn't sure she could reclaim. The thought of returning to that environment terrified her. It would be a painful reminder of everything she had lost. She held the invitation, torn about what to do. The weight of the decision felt overwhelming. As if sensing her inner struggle, Max lay down next to her, resting his head gently on her foot. He didn't need to say anything. His constant presence was enough to remind her that she wasn't entirely alone. Deep down, Clara knew she couldn't keep hiding forever. She missed the art, the life that had once filled her with purpose and passion. But going back to the museum also meant confronting her greatest fear, accepting her new reality. She looked at Max, who remained still by her side, and made a decision. "Let's try," she whispered, more to herself than to the dog. The exhibition would be her first real test, and this time, she wouldn't face it alone. The day of the exhibition arrived faster than Clara had expected. The morning was bright, and the sound of cars and people in the street made her uneasy. Dressed in a simple blouse and dark pants, she stood at her apartment door with Max by her side. Her heart was pounding, and her hands stroked Max's leash, trying to calm herself. Max seemed to sense her hesitation, but remained calm, as always. He had become more than just a guide dog. Over time, he had become her emotional support. Clara took a deep breath, trying to absorb some of his calmness. As they left the building, the fresh morning air touched her face. The honking of horns and the movement around her still caused discomfort, but this time, she focused on Max's steps, trusting him. The first few meters were tense, but Max guided her safely, carefully avoiding invisible obstacles. Each step toward the museum was a test of her resolve. The sound of cars, the hurried footsteps of people, they were constant reminders of how the world had changed for her. When they finally arrived at the museum's entrance, Clara stopped. She stood still, feeling the weight of the decision she had made. It was here that her old life still felt so real, so close, yet so far away. She remembered running through these halls, excited about the next exhibition, the next piece of art she discovered. Now, the world of colors and forms had become a painful memory. Max stood by her side, waiting silently. Clara felt the tension in her muscles, the hesitation that almost made her turn back. But then something shifted. She remembered how she had stroked Max's fur just days before, how his presence had comforted her. If Max could be here, patient and loyal, why couldn't she take the next step? Gathering her courage, Clara took the first step inside the museum. The familiar smell of waxed floors and paintings on the walls enveloped her, bringing back memories. Her heart raced, but she continued. Max, ever attentive, guided her through the doors, skillfully navigating people and obstacles. With each step, her anxiety seemed to grow. She could hear the murmur of voices, the footsteps echoing through the halls. What used to be music to her ears now sent a chill down her spine. The fear of being confronted with all that she had lost made her chest tighten. When Clara finally reached the main gallery, she felt Max's soft nudge, alerting her that they had arrived. She sensed people around her noticing her presence, but she tried to ignore their gazes. Max led her to the center of the room, where one of the artworks was displayed. Unable to see the painting in front of her, Clara extended her hand. Her fingers touched the frame, feeling its texture. The touch was familiar, bringing back a wave of nostalgia. Even though she couldn't see the piece, she knew exactly what it was. She remembered the restoration process, the meticulous details she had worked on. In that moment, Clara finally allowed herself to cry. Tears flowed silently, not of sadness, but of a painful, liberating acceptance. Max, sensing her emotion, moved closer, pressing his nose against her leg, as if to remind her that she wasn't alone. At that moment, Clara understood that even though she had lost her sight, there was still so much she could feel and experience. Art wasn't just in her eyes, it was in her emotions, her memories, and her heart. A few weeks after her visit to the museum, Clara felt different. Returning to the place that had once meant so much to her had been difficult but necessary. It was as if an invisible barrier had been broken. For the first time since the accident, she no longer felt like a prisoner in her own life. Inspired by her experience at the museum and by Max's unwavering support, Clara made an important decision. She wanted to return to the world of art, but in a way that was accessible to everyone, including herself. The idea came to her as a whisper at first, but soon it grew into something tangible, a sensory exhibition, specifically designed for people with visual impairments. Clara contacted the museum, where her former colleague welcomed her with open arms. Together, they began working on the concept of an exhibition that allowed art to be experienced in alternative ways, through touch, sound, and even smell. Each piece would be accompanied by tactile descriptions, audio narrations, and textures that made the artwork accessible to those who, like Clara, could no longer see. The project brought Clara a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in a long time. She threw herself into the work, coordinating artists, discussing ideas, and even testing the sensory experiences herself. Max, of course, was always by her side, her tireless companion. On the day of the exhibition's opening, Clara was nervous but filled with anticipation. There was something deeply symbolic about the moment. She had found a new way to be connected to the art world, and more importantly, a way to help others like her feel included. As she listened to the first visitors interacting with the artwork, Clara smiled. It wasn't the type of art she had once envisioned for herself, but in many ways, it was even more meaningful. Months after the opening of the sensory exhibition, Clara felt a peace she hadn't known in years. The exhibition had been a success, and the response from the public exceeded all expectations. People from all walks of life, both with and without visual impairments, had participated, exploring art in ways Clara had never imagined. She continued expanding the project, creating new exhibitions, and connecting with other curators who wanted to bring accessibility to the art world. Every new challenge brought a sense of fulfillment, and Max, always by her side, remained her constant companion. On a spring day, Clara walked through the museum, guided by Max, listening to the visitors interacting with the exhibition. She smiled, remembering how it all started. She realized that, although she had lost her sight, she had gained something much greater, a new way of seeing the world through emotions and senses. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more heartwarming stories about our furry best friends. Share your own stories in the comments below. We'd love to hear how your dog has made a difference in your life. And remember, every week, we bring more content for dog lovers like you. See you in the next video. If